Welcome to the Daily History Chronicle. Each day, we travel back to discover a pivotal moment that changed the world. These aren't just dates and facts. They're stories of courage, conflict, innovation, and consequence that still echo through our lives today. Are you ready to explore? Let's see what happened on this day in history.
Good morning, and welcome to today's episode. I'm Richard Backus, publisher of University Teaching Edition, and each day I invite you to join me as we reflect on a significant moment from our shared past. Today is November 10th, and we're looking back 56 years to November 10th, 1969. On that Monday morning, something revolutionary appeared on American television screens. It wasn't a news broadcast about the Vietnam War or the recent moon landing. It wasn't another Western or sitcom. It was a children's show unlike anything that had come before. A program designed with a radical mission: to use television to teach poor and minority children the skills they needed to succeed in school. The show was called Sesame Street, and over the next 5 decades, it would teach hundreds of millions of children around the world not just their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, but lessons about kindness, diversity, and how to navigate a complex world. Sesame Street became the most influential children's television program in history. But it was also something more: a bold experiment in using media technology to address social inequality, a statement about what television could be, and a testament to the power of treating children with intelligence and respect. The story of Sesame Street's creation and impact is about more than entertainment. It's about innovation, social purpose, and the radical idea that all children, regardless of race or economic background, deserve access to quality education. To understand why Sesame Street was revolutionary, we need to understand the America of the late 1960s. The Civil Rights Movement had achieved major legislative victories with the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. But educational inequality remained stark. Poor children, particularly poor Black and Latino children, often entered kindergarten already behind their more affluent peers in basic skills like letter recognition and counting. This achievement gap was visible and measurable. Middle-class children typically arrive at school already knowing the alphabet, recognizing numbers, and understanding basic concepts. Many had been read to regularly, exposed to books and educational toys, and taught by parents who had the time and resources to dedicate to early education. Poor children often lacked these advantages. They entered school already behind, and many never caught up. Traditional solutions focused on expanding preschool programs like Head Start, which President Johnson had launched in 1965. But these programs were expensive and couldn't reach every child who needed help. Meanwhile, there was one resource that reached into virtually every American home, rich and poor: television. By the late 1960s, 96% of American households had televisions. Children were watching an average of 3 to 4 hours of TV per day. But what they were watching, cartoons, game shows, and age-inappropriate adult programming, wasn't teaching them anything useful for school. To many educators and activists, this seemed like a massive wasted opportunity. Into this situation stepped a young television producer named Joan Gans Cooney. Joan Gans Cooney had worked in public television in New York, producing documentaries about poverty and social issues. In 1966, she was asked by Lloyd Morissette, a Carnegie Corporation vice president and child development expert, to study whether television could be used to educate preschool children, particularly disadvantaged children. Cooney's research report, The potential uses of television in preschool education was revolutionary in its ambition. She proposed creating a television program that would use the techniques of commercial television: catchy music, fast pacing, colorful visuals, repetition, and humor to teach children academic and social skills. The show would be specifically designed to reach poor and minority children who lacked access to quality preschool education. This was a radical idea for several reasons. First, educational television had always been boring, slow-paced, staid, more like school than like entertainment. Cooney proposed making education fun, using the same techniques that advertisers use to sell products. If TV could convince children to want sugary cereal, couldn't it also teach them to recognize letters and numbers? Second, the show would be explicitly multicultural. The cast would include Black, Latino, and white actors working together as equals. The setting would be an urban neighborhood, not a suburban fantasy. Children of all races would see themselves represented on screen, something virtually non-existent in American television of the time. Third, the show would be research-driven. Educational experts and child psychologists would be involved in every aspect of the show's development. Content would be tested with children to see what actually worked. This wasn't going to be adults guessing what children needed. It would be based on science and data. With funding from the Carnegie Corporation, the Ford Foundation, and the federal government, Cooney established the Children's Television Workshop in 1968. She assembled an extraordinary team that included educators, writers, researchers, and a puppeteer named Jim Henson, whose Muppets would become the show's most iconic element. On November 10, 1969, Sesame Street premiered on the National Educational Television Network, the precursor to PBS. The first episode introduced viewers to an urban street scene, a diverse neighborhood with a mix of characters, some human and some distinctly not. There was Gordon, a black teacher who served as a warm, authoritative father figure. There was Susan, his wife. There was Mr. Hooper, the kindly Jewish shopkeeper. And there were the Muppets. Big Bird, an enormous yellow bird who was childlike and curious. Oscar the Grouch, who lived in a trash can and taught children that it was okay to have bad moods. Bert and Ernie, the odd couple roommates. And Cookie Monster, whose unbridled enthusiasm for cookies was both funny and relatable. From the beginning, Sesame Street was different. It was fast-paced, with short segments that matched children's attention spans. It used catchy songs to teach concepts, songs that would get stuck in viewers' heads, reinforcing the lessons. It employed repetition, having characters revisit concepts multiple times in different ways. And it treated children as intelligent viewers capable of understanding complex ideas if they were presented clearly. The show's educational content was carefully structured. Each episode focused on specific letters and numbers, teaching recognition, pronunciation, and basic concepts. But the education went beyond academics. Characters demonstrated cooperation, problem-solving, and emotional intelligence. They showed children how to handle disappointment, how to be a good friend, how to understand different perspectives. The multicultural casting was groundbreaking. At a time when American television was still largely segregated, Sesame Street showed Black, white, Latino, and Asian characters interacting as equals, living in the same neighborhood, solving problems together. For many children, particularly white suburban children, this was their first sustained exposure to people of different races in positive, everyday situations. The show was an immediate hit, but more importantly, it worked. Research studies conducted both by the Children's Television Workshop and by independent researchers found that children who watched Sesame Street regularly showed significant improvement in letter and number recognition, vocabulary, and school readiness. The impact was strongest for disadvantaged children, exactly the audience the show had been designed to reach. This wasn't just anecdotal, it was measurable, scientific evidence that television could be an effective educational tool. Sesame Street had proven that Joan Gans Cooney's vision could work. Over the following years, Sesame Street continued to innovate and take risks. When actor Will Lee, who played Mr. Hooper, died in 1982, the show addressed his death directly in an episode where Big Bird learns that Mr. Hooper has died and isn't coming back. The episode dealt honestly with grief and loss, teaching children that sad feelings were normal and that loved ones live on in our memories. It's still considered one of the most potent moments in television history. The show tackled divorce, introducing a character named Abby Cadabby, whose parents were divorced. It addressed autism by introducing Julia, a Muppet with autism, teaching children about neurodiversity and acceptance. In the aftermath of 9/11, the show helped children process fear and uncertainty. During the HIV/AIDS crisis, an international version of the show in South Africa introduced an HIV-positive Muppet to reduce stigma. Sesame Street also pioneered educational entertainment worldwide. The show has been adapted in more than 150 countries, with local versions tailored to each culture's needs. In post-apartheid South Africa, Takalani Sesame addressed AIDS education and racial reconciliation. In Egypt, Alam Simsim promoted literacy and gender equality. In Northern Ireland, Sesame Street brought together Protestant and Catholic communities. Each adaptation maintained Sesame Street's core mission while addressing local challenges. Sesame Street's funding model has always been precarious. Originally funded by government grants and private foundations, the show eventually needed to generate revenue to survive. The Children's Television Workshop, later renamed Sesame Workshop, licensed characters for books, toys, and merchandise. This created tension. How do you maintain educational integrity while also selling Big Bird dolls? The organization navigated this carefully, ensuring that licensed products aligned with educational values and that revenue supported the show's mission. But it was a constant balancing act. When federal funding for public broadcasting faced repeated cuts, particularly in the 1980s and 1990s, Sesame Street had to become more entrepreneurial. In 2016, Sesame Workshop made a controversial deal with HBO, giving the premium cable channel first-run rights to new episodes before they appeared on PBS. This brought in much-needed revenue, but raised questions about accessibility. Would poor children, the show's original target audience, still have free access? The deal specified that episodes would appear on PBS 9 months after their HBO debut, ensuring continued free access. But the arrangement highlighted the ongoing tension between the show's social mission and financial realities. Today, Sesame Street faces challenges its creators never anticipated. Children's media has fragmented across hundreds of channels and streaming services. YouTube, tablets, and smartphones offer endless entertainment options. Attention spans have shortened. The media landscape that Sesame Street pioneered has become crowded and competitive, yet the show continues to matter. In an era of increasing polarization and declining social trust, Sesame Street still models cooperation, diversity, and kindness. In a media environment often designed to exploit children's attention for profit, Sesame Street maintains its educational mission. In a society still grappling with inequality, the show continues to provide free, high-quality educational content to children who need it most. The show's legacy extends far beyond television. Generations of educators were influenced by Sesame Street's approaches to teaching, using music, repetition, and fun to engage students. The show demonstrated that entertainment and education aren't opposites, but can reinforce each other. It proved that research-based design could create practical educational tools. And it showed that media could be a force for social good, not just commercial profit. Sesame Street also influenced how we think about representation in media. The show's multicultural casting and its efforts to include characters with disabilities from different family structures and from various backgrounds helped normalize diversity for generations of children. While representation in media still has far to go, Sesame Street pioneered the idea that children's programming should reflect the real diversity of the world. The world that Sesame Street premiered in 1969 looks very different from our world today. But the core problems the show was designed to address, educational inequality, the need for quality early childhood education, the challenge of preparing all children for success, remain as relevant as ever. Research consistently shows that early childhood education is one of the most effective interventions for improving long-term outcomes, particularly for disadvantaged children. Quality preschool programs generate returns that far exceed their costs through improved educational achievement, higher earnings, and reduced social problems. Sesame Street provided and continues to provide a form of early education that reaches children who might not have access to formal preschool. In an era of increasing screen time and concerns about children's media consumption, Sesame Street reminds us that the question isn't whether children watch screens, but what they watch on those screens. Not all screen time is equal. Media designed with an educational purpose, created by experts and tested for effectiveness, can be valuable. Media designed merely to capture attention and sell products is something else entirely. The show also reminds us that education is about more than academic skills. Yes, children need to learn letters and numbers, but they also need to learn empathy, cooperation, emotional regulation, and how to navigate a diverse world. Sesame Street understood this from the beginning, integrating social emotional learning with academic content decades before social emotional learning became an educational buzzword. Perhaps most importantly, Sesame Street represents a vision of what television, and by extension all media, could be. Joan Gans Cooney and her team asked, what if we use the most powerful communication technology of our age not just for entertainment or profit, but to address social problems? What if we created something that was both popular and purposeful, both entertaining and educational? They proved it could be done. And that proof matters now more than ever as we grapple with new technologies, social media, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and ask similar questions about their social purpose. The great philosopher George Santayana once wrote, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." Sesame Street teaches us that media can be a powerful force for education and social good when it's designed with purpose, grounded in research, and committed to serving those who need it most. As we navigate our digital age, those lessons remain as vital as they were on that November morning in 1969. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Richard Backus, and I'll be back tomorrow with another story from our shared past.